Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the sophomore album from Ought, titled Sun Coming Down. So close to this time last year, give or take a month or two, I decided to finally cover the debut of Canadian indie rock group Ought, more than any other day. Based out of Montreal, crackling with the hyper-literate, jittery energy you'd expect from college students recording while the student population was protesting, it won a lot of critical acclaim from a lot of critics for the obvious parallels to Talking Heads and maybe even Vampire Weekend. I was a little bit more ambivalent on the group, mostly because no matter how much I like the very smart lyricism and the interweaving chaotic sound of the album, it definitely overstayed its welcome, occasionally wasn't as nuanced as it tried to be, and ultimately left me feeling with a distinctive feeling of anticlimax towards the end. It didn't really come together as well as I wanted it to. Since then, Ought has been touring extensively at a breakneck pace, patching together a new album between shows, and reportedly doubling down on their influences from, say, Sonic Youth or maybe even The Fall, cranking up the energy and the groove. On the one hand, I didn't have any problems with this. Ought never seemed like a band lacking in nervous energy, but I've been looking for some more aggressive indie rock as of late, and this could probably satisfy me. But on the other hand, it didn't look like the band's issues with succinctness had gone away. Only 8 songs, again, yet your average song length is about 5 minutes, with the longest being at nearly 8. But hey, if the music doesn't drag, I'm not about to complain. So what does Ought deliver with Sun Coming Down, their sophomore album? Well, honestly, just like the last Ought record, I've been struggling a bit with this one, which is kind of amusing because the deeper I've dug into this album, the more I found so many thematic parallels between More Than Any Other Day and Sun Coming Down, just transported into a slightly different setting and with a slightly wider scope. The most pronounced changes on this album are instrumental, but not so much that Ought's key sound has been lost, so much as been refined and focused a little bit more. So yes, I'd argue that Sun Coming Down by Ought is indeed an improvement, but I'm not certain by how much. It's definitely really good, but I'm not quite certain whether or not it's great. So let's start with the vocals from Tim Darcy. Yes, he changed his surname from Beeler, and I'm happy to say there's been a real improvement here. Not only are his vocals more audible against the mix, there are a couple points where it gets drowned out, but far less than before. His presence is much more assured and assertive, his nasal tones standing out with much more presence and bite in a way that reminds me of a less theatrical Elias Ronenfeld of Ice Age, with more of a white-knuckled control in his words. It's less sung than half-yelping mantras that has this jittery energy, but a shade more self-awareness and bite and sardonic sly commentary with a lot of sarcasm. Of course, it helps that the instrumentation has been given a lot more foundation and groove to work with on this album. Less of the all-over-the-place ramshackle construction that could lose a little bit of steam, but then on-the-rails progression that ratchets up the tension to explode at any moment. It's a subtle shift, and I can definitely see some wishing for more of the wilder moments that characterize Ought's debut album, but I'd argue this album hits with a lot more of a consistent, cohesive punch, mostly thanks to the increased melodic interplay, more rigid grooves, and the drum progressions. They managing to keep the tracks from exploding off kilter when unnecessary. The post-punk influences ring through the most in the gallop of the bass and drums on songs like Men for Miles, or the thickening pile of riffs on the title track, or the rickety tempo changes on The Line. But in choosing to write some more dense, frenetic, and actually shorter tracks, Ought actually manages to pull together some of their punk edge for The Combo, and especially Celebration, balanced with that especially thick menace in the bass balanced against the buzz of the guitars. But for me, the most striking moments were the most melodic songs on this album, with such a solid foundation, the guitar interplay on the absolutely superb passionate term, and the album's centerpiece track Beautiful Blue Sky. The latter case of the spiky guitar licks coiling in upon themselves as the grooves just mature throughout the song. The longest track at nearly 8 minutes, and yet with enough progressions within it to earn that length. But if I were to find anything to dislike about the instrumentation, it'd be that I wish some of the guitar tones had a little bit more texture and smolder and sizzle in a Viet Cong sort of vein, fitting with a more monochromatic sound and yet adding a little bit more seething intensity. I want this album to explode just a little bit more than it does here. But then again, the more I try to unpack some of these lyrics, the less I'm certain that would work best with the album's themes. Now, these Ought albums are always a little bit tricky to unpack, especially when you can't find complete lyrics for every song online. Get on that, guys. And this one is no exception. And yet, as I said before, it does play in a similar lane to the first album. Their debut focused on impending collapse, trying to find purpose before falling into the system, if that purpose even does exist. Sun Coming Down picks up within that system of monotony, where the passion is just faded out, and even if you climb up that monument of achievement, all you'll see is faceless Men for Miles. The record's first real gut punch comes in the recognition of how hard it can be to restart that passion when it failed in the past. And yet, with all the signs falling into place at the right time, our narrator has his revelation. He loses his fear of death and loss. It's an exultant moment on Beautiful Blue Sky. One of the biggest highs of the album as he goes back into the world of superficiality, and it almost seems like he approaches those manic conversations with the sort of free-spirited good humor that comes with not needing to care anymore. And currently working in an office environment myself and having seen people give their 2 weeks notice, that willingness to engage in trivialities that they never cared for before because there's no consequences anymore, it's pretty realistic. It really struck a real chord with me. And just like in reality, it unnerves precisely everyone around them. Because suddenly that social order they all relied upon is disrupted. It's why the amazing awkwardness and passive aggression to celebration was so great for me, as our narrator hasn't so much embraced his newfound energy, right? He's not being embraced by anybody else, and he's reveling in his newfound disruptive momentum. But it's also drawing some notice from up and down the chain, because whatever sparked his first passion comes back into the light and pulls our narrator away from his established order, or what is perceived by his superiors as sparking that established order, perhaps a ruse to loop him back in, and they try to bring him back into line, to sign on that line, fall back into step, or at least highlight for him everywhere that it could go wrong. But then again, those are the same conclusions that our narrator has already drawn for himself. There's a wonderful feeling of self-awareness through this album that I really do appreciate, and the ambiguity of the closing track, Never Better, intrigues me even further. You could take his words as a passive-aggressive exit as he drives a truck loaded with everything into that setting sun, or as that new job with a different cog with more veiled independence. The Never Better words passed off as he holds onto his newfound passion even though he continues on the edges of that system, or just without his notice being inside that system. Was it a he loved Big Brother moment, or a chance to conceal his resurgent passion under the guise of independence? I honestly doubt we'll ever really tell if there's a payoff to this narrative, or indeed if there's a narrative at all, because of all the interviews I dug up suggested there was a lot of ad-libs, and my favorite line on this record, I'm talking out of my ass because my heart's not open. Regardless of all that, there's a riotous sort of tension on Sun Coming Down by Ott. The sort of record that's straining at every edge that has the poise yet to know when to explode. Lyrically, it's drenched in sarcasm, non sequiturs, and lines that are profoundly perfunctory. And the way that it can forcibly subvert the mundane hit me really hard. I wouldn't quite say it's a classic or truly fantastic album that dropped this year. Not every song hits with the impact of their best, and the production doesn't quite give enough room to the vocals to really breathe. But for me, a light 8 out of 10. Definitely a recommendation. I can't say this will be for everybody though. Odd is a band that outright shuns pop appeal, and it's a tricky album to really deconstruct, required a lot of listens on my part, but if you put in the time, definitely worth it, so check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.